problem slightly.
Yeah, I just tested it yesterday and it worked. Okay,
Maybe
there we go.
Microsoft is on AT&T.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I will call the meeting to order.
The meeting has been posted according to open meeting laws. President Johnson,
Here.
Trustee Alexander,
Here.
Trustee Holm,
Here.
Trustee Renucci,
Here.
Trustee Smalley.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Item 1, miscellaneous business, consideration of recommendation to amend DNR stewardship grant application. And so I'll turn it over to Tim and Jason. I think Tim sent something earlier today, and you've got some updates from Speaker Voss.
Yes. So, did everybody get a chance to read that memo? I can kind of walk through it as well.
Nope, I didn't.
No.
All right. So let me
Zach.
do this. I'll share my screen.
Here, why don't I do that, Tim, just because
Okay.
you're on your phone. Give me 1 second.
Actually, I have my laptop still. But
Oh, you're on your
That will
laptop. Okay. Here, I'll share. I've got it ready.
I've got it.
Oh, there you
If
go.
that works.
Yep, you got it.
Okay. Good. So we talked, I guess, about a month ago, maybe a little less than that, about the DNR stewardship grant and DNR's authority to award a project up to $249,999 before needing joint finance approval. At the time we met, Jason and I had met with the DNR, and they talked about the pitfalls of potentially losing the money if joint finance were to deny the request. And so at the time they were recommending, and we recommended taking a reduction down to $249,999 to avoid losing those funds and to be able to keep those without having to worry about joint finance. After that meeting, I got a call back from Voss's office. Because I had reached out prior, but just hadn't heard back. And I've been working with them now for probably at least a week, kind of some back and forths, and was able to understand that the reason for the objection, it's kind of in that consent period. They call it a 1310 review, which I'm learning all sorts of new things. As part of that, they had an objection. And the objection was because of the lack of local fund match related to the DNR grant. So if you look at the screen here, I'm calling it limited funding. This is what we voted to do a few weeks ago, which you got a DOT TAP grant match of $185,000, essentially in a DNR grant match of $0. Now that was different than my understanding when I presented to the board. But this is what was presented to joint finance and thus the DNR. But then your grant for the stewardship would be capped at $249,000. The option, and I'll talk to you about a little bit about what we have to do or would have to do if we want to do this. The option to get the full funding, we kind of looked at it, and Jason and I talked, and we were under the impression and talked to the board about a 50% match for that stewardship grant a few weeks ago. So I said to working with Jake at Voss's office, I said, listen, we believe we actually had already committed $250,000. We thought in local funds. Apparently we hadn't, which is great. But if we were to commit that $250,000, could we receive the full grant amount of the $458,000? So behind the scenes, Jake has talked to the co-chair and the person objecting. We don't know, we being myself and the board, don't know who the objector was. Jake does, but that's kind of beside the scenes. And he said it's in confidence, I can't tell you, which is fine. But in talks, it's his understanding that the objection would be removed if we were to commit to a local match of $250,000. Thus, we would get a full grant of $458 instead
An
of the
additional 250.
correct, an additional $250. So on the village side, not working great. On the village side, if we committed 250, we would pick up the 250 plus approximately 208. Which then allows us really the capacity to hopefully complete the trail to Town Line Road or just do some bigger and better things where we can do the Mill Pond parking lot, which is already part of the budget, and as well as get a substantial trail in along the creek and whatnot. So-
Or other things at Mill Pond Park, yeah.
Correct. And in talking with DNR, we have some pretty good flexibility on how those funds are used. They very much said that we have flexibility. You know, we can use it for a trailhead at Mill Pond Park. We can do parking lot improvements. As long as it's trail related or recreation related, it's something that they would allow us to use those funds for.
So, go ahead, Tim.
Go ahead.
I guess my question more for Eileen and Jason is from a budget standpoint, are we just are we just saying, oh, 250,000 of projects we already were committed to, we're saying is part of this, or?
Well, we do have the money budgeted this year for the parking lot, which I would think we would use that towards our match, right? And in 24, Tim, really, we're only designing this year, correct?
Correct. Yeah,
So
the thought is it's
construction
design.
would be 25. So that's really the bigger question, is where those funds come from in 25 and what we need to move around or how we do that.
What concerns do you have about that? I know we haven't started 2025 budget discussions, but Eileen, do you have any concerns? This would put us, in a tough spot.
I think we definitely will have to look at how this comes into play with the other planned capital projects. I believe in 25, we were planning to do a borrowing.
Yeah, I just don't want to add to that given our interest rates.
How much is left in ARPA? Can that be used towards this?
We had allocated the remainder of the ARPA to the municipal building project. So you could take it from the municipal building project, put it towards this, then you're just going to use reserves for the municipal building project. So, it's kind of a shell game then, because the money.
And I guess the other thing is, let's keep in mind here is, for this discussion, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Tim, but let's just say, we're looking at potential $2 million grant here, but if we only use $1 million of that, then we're only on the hook for our share of that. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I've seen, I had another community that they had a large grant and they didn't actually hit the amount, but they allowed them to just reduce their local share, which was kind of nice.
40 had asked when these funds need to be spent by.
They will do extensions as well. So I believe we have 2 years, but they are willing to do extensions on time.
Both for TAP and stewardship?
I'm talking about stewardship right now.
Okay.
TAP is more tied in.
Are these reimbursed? Are these reimbursements? Like we front the money and then they reimburse us?
Yeah, but if you can do draws, it's very similar to the dam where you can do draws on that.
Okay.
How much did we earmark for the parking lot?
I think it was 90,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, 85, 90.
Yeah. So we're talking 160.
We're looking at 160 in addition to that.
And that 90 was for design and
That's-
construction. Is that right?
That's correct.
Did we have anything in the future capital plan
Yeah.
for impoundment remediation in 25 at all?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question, man. 40 was.
Did we have anything in the 25, you know, the 5-year capital plan, anything in 25 for the I'll call it now park, and further remediation? Or I guess, what did we have in Parks and Rec that we thought would be in 25?
I'm trying to pull open.
So I just have my worksheet.
Do we have to make a decision on this by today?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And do we know what the total cost is gonna be for that trail out to Honey Creek?
I
That
don't,
was based on the TAP grant, right? The 1.3. That was our projected number, Tim?
yeah, and I don't know if we have the full cost for out to town line at this point. But it gets you either substantially there or it gets you there.
For the 1.6 or the 2?
For the, well, let's go back here. So the DOT TAP
Mhm.
is only for, no, that's not good. Trying to highlight stuff. The TAP grant's only for the trail from Mill Pond Park out to Honey Creek Road in the Lofts area.
Right.
The stewardship's where we have flexibility, and that's where we would use that, in my mind, at a minimum to do Mill Pond Park parking lot, because that's already part of the capital program. But then also be able to use those funds for trails and recreation in and around the stream area.
So in 2024, we had the impoundment redevelopment in the budget for $200,000 coming from reserves. Pave Mill Pond Park for $85,000. So we had $285,000 in 2024's budget for those two projects.
Okay. So we were already planning to put forth money from reserve.
Yes, for the impoundment redevelopment,
Okay. And that's what we're talking about here. So
Yep.
correct.
that makes me feel a lot better, because in essence, what we're saying is we're going to spend $250,000, or after that netting of the Mill Pond there, 160 to get an additional 208.
Yeah,
And so, but if we were already committed, well, then we were going to spend the money anyway. We might as
Right.
well say it applies to this and move forward, is my opinion.
Agreed.
Yeah.
regarding the semantics of how this would work, I had a call at about 1:15 today with Jake, talking through the process. What we would need to do is send a letter to DNR requesting how do you put it? Let me go back to my email real quick.
Withdraw.
Is it? It might be.
The trail out to Honey Creek Road. That money is, that TAP grant has to be used for that. I understand. But the engineer said, well, maybe he didn't know.
It essentially says we have to write a letter on
No,
village
separate
letterhead
town line, the sep- the other
requesting to keep the project within joint finance review, but that we would like to add additional local match of that 250 to the project.
Okay. And Jake believes that the legislator who is objecting will withdraw their objection,
Yes.
and
The
then this
pro-
will go through.
Yeah, so almost getting into the weeds here. Once that's put in there, he believes that it will be withdrawn, and I believe he's had direct conversations with him with this, but I
Okay.
don't know who or what, but he made that pretty clear. At that point, it kicks off another couple of days where somebody else could object. He doesn't expect that's going to happen. But if they would at that point, and then we might be back here having a meeting asking to pull the thing again.
Okay.
But he doesn't expect that to happen.
Yeah.
But it does give us that. So if that objection remains and they decide they're going to go to a hearing because they're still in a new objection, at that point, he said there still would be time for us to withdraw it and just take the 250.
Okay.
So it gives us some assurance that, hey, by doing this, we're not all of a sudden throwing it, there's less risk there in my mind because we'd have time to react still.
So it kind of resets the clock a bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
But DNR still needs this letter today?
Today,
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
they made that very, very clear.
Okay.
So I guess if this is what the board wishes, then we could just talk after the meeting and figure out, what we're gonna do to pull that together.
All right. I'm prepared to make a motion. Any other questions? All right, I'll make a motion that staff submit a letter withdrawing our previous withdrawal and
Rescinding.
rescinding.
There you
thank
go.
you, our previous withdrawal and adding that we will include a $250,000 match.
I'll second that.
All right. Any questions or discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And you can go ahead, you can use my signature stamp on that. Thank you.
Okay. I just want the board to understand one thing. Tim took this upon himself to reach out to Voss. I think that's definitely worth noting here, because that, potentially found us a couple $100,000 more. And I think that was great on his part and really appreciate that.
Thanks, Tim. Take an attaboy out of petty cash.
Take two.
Yeah, thanks for looking out for us in these projects. Really do appreciate it. And Jason too. I know this has been confusing and appreciate your time. So with that, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, everyone.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right,
Thank you.
we are adjourned.